I am Sherry Tischer, and I lead our staffing practice here at Scale Funding. And this has been a tough year on a lot of staffing agencies. We all know that revenue's down across the board, and we've been listening to our clients. They've been asking us for thought leadership and strategies for how to get through this challenging time. And sales, of course, top line revenue is top of mind right now, and marketing goes hand in hand with sales. So I went to a friend of mine in the industry, Jeff Pelliccio, founder of Allied Insight, and I asked him to present this webinar today, focusing on lead generation. Since 2013, Jeff has supported the staffing industry with innovative marketing strategies, first as the marketing director of a staffing firm on the East Coast, and currently as the founder of Allied Insight. Allied Insight is a marketing firm that works solely with the staffing industry. Jeff has presented sessions and led panel discussions at Staffing World and other industry events. So I thank him so very much for doing this for us today. Jeff, the floor is yours.
Sherry, thank you so much for the warm introduction and kind words. And thank all of you for attending the Lead Generation Unleashed, Amplifying Sales Marketing in Staffing. You know, it's challenging whenever we create one of these presentations because we're not really quite sure who's going to be in attendance, if it's going to be individuals that are going to be applying the concepts, those managing the concepts, or those impacted by the concepts. And so with that said, hopefully, whether you're an individual that's in marketing, sales leadership, or in the executive team, there will be bits and pieces in here that'll help you progress the conversations at your staffing firm internally, where you can start helping to gain better impacts from your efforts, where you can make more traction on your corporate initiatives as well as your goals. So without further ado, let's jump into it. First things first, if we're not connected on LinkedIn, let's make that change today. So that's my QR code. It'll take you right to my LinkedIn page. If we're not connected or online friends, let's make sure that we make that adjustment. If there's ever anything that you come up to, I will tell you, like, one of the reasons why I felt the need to create Allied Insight was to make sure that there was better community service. And so if there's something that comes up in your world and you think I could be a resource, either for the information that I have or the people that I know, I am more than happy to respond and provide you whatever insights I can. So again, scan the QR code. It'll take you right to my LinkedIn page, and let's get connected. I have been in the staffing industry for 13 years. I am the founder and CEO of Allied Insight. And, this is an industry that I think is ever evolving. We've gone through a lot of changes over the last decade or so with the implementation of greater software services or software technologies. And then we've also seen huge shifts, not just the effects of the pandemic, but I also think that there are some components to the individuals that are in decision-making roles at organizations. I think all those things are sort of coming together at a very interesting moment, which creates some good opportunities, but also creates certain challenges for some of us. So we'll dig into all those things. But first, let's talk about the agenda. So for this session, we're going to really dig into three main areas. The first of which is those B2B market trends, right? Those things that are happening that are definitely sort of applying pressure, creating influence in the space that we're trying to navigate as a business. The next is, discussing sort of those compelling offers, things that convert, like how it is that you can kind of create those elements from a very authentic space in your organization and make them meaningful, obviously, for your community. The next part, we're going to discuss the structure that you have to put in place in order to make sure that lead generation campaigns function as intended. And last, we're going to look at some metrics that you can use in order to prioritize certain aspects of those campaigns to understand where things were successful and where you could maybe do better next time. So first things first, we need to get into the data. So with regards to the B2B market trends, these are all in reference to the B2B buyer. Yeah. So it's not necessarily staffing specific because it's a bit niche, but when you look at some of these organizations that are pulling in information, we have to look at it from a sense of like professional services. So you'll also notice that these reports are all from 2023. These are the year end 2023. Unfortunately, they don't do mid-year assessments. And so we'll have to wait to the end of the year in order to like figure out how 2024 looked and be able to make predictions for 25. But these do very much govern where we're going and why you and your strategies might be getting impact. impacted. So first, 71% of the buyers are downloading and consuming multiple assets before making a decision. This is really critical to know because if you don't have downloadable resources, which are a bit more robust and educational in nature, then and this behavior is true, then they're likely going somewhere else in order to get that knowledge, in order to gain that advice, which will likely slant them in the favor of whoever it is that they're downloading from. 46% of buyers are increasing the amount of content that they consume. So while we definitely need to focus on like what it is that we're doing from a sales initiative perspective and how we can sort of interact and get in front of more communities that are like the ones that we sell to, we also want to remember that content is still very much important. Individuals are still vetting out your company and trying to make sure that the information that they're being introduced by your sales team with is something that you endorse as a corporation. Also, 89% of buyers are more likely to purchase when they feel understood. So there's an even greater need to make sure that the things that you are publishing and putting out there are relevant to the environments and the things that those individuals in your community are experiencing. And so, kind of pulling these three bits together really give you, I think, a pretty clear picture of what the new demand is in the market space. There was also an additional data point that I had heard while I was at the Recruitment Agency Expo in London this year, which said that 62% of prospect education happens outside of the sales call. This is a very interesting concept. Yeah. Typically speaking, I think we all tend to put a lot of weight behind getting someone on the call. I can't tell you how many times I've heard, if I can just have that opportunity to get a phone call with the person, I'll close the transaction. And while that might still very much be true, I do believe that there is a fair amount of education that is occurring prior to that call and maybe even post that call that we do need to recognize. So once again, your calls can only be so effective, and the data is showing what the level of effectiveness there is to that. The rest is going to be making sure that there is a high level of communication that your sales team is using to continue to bolster the conversation that they're trying to have. The last little piece of data in terms of a market trend that I feel like is happening, so this is a little bit more anecdotally speaking and not so much data driven, and that is that we should definitely start to consider the generational shift within the decision making roles. And so, there was definitely a report that was out pre-pandemic. I want to say it was like 2020. I can't remember the source at the time, but where they were speaking about how the changing of the generational the shift in generational volume in the workplace was starting to change from baby boomers to Generation X and millennials. And with that said, I would imagine that if decision making roles tend to yield to maybe older professionals who have more experience in the workforce, then there has got to be a pretty good shift from the baby boomer population to that Generation X population, which we grew up with the birth of digital space, right? So we had this time in our lives when everything was very much analog and there wasn't automation and sequencing that we were familiar with or were being served, and then we were. So having that difference in knowledge base and having that difference in awareness from a generational perspective, it absolutely changes the behavior when reacting to things in your inbox or when consuming content in different ways. So I do think that as an anecdotal component, it's something that we should definitely consider. So in terms of these trends, the effects that they're having, right, is that there is a much greater demand for quality and value in those offers, right? So making sure that the things that we're producing as an organization really do align with what the community is researching and trying to resolve is going to be really, really important. And I know that that sounds very obvious, but unfortunately, many times we tend to invert that concept when building resources. We tend to think about things in terms of what we want, right? In terms of the leads that we want to generate, and then how that person converting will give my salesperson an opportunity to have a conversation. But we do need to sort of slow the roll a little bit and put a lot more consideration into the quality of the resource that you're going to be creating to ensure that it actually has the attraction to the community. The next is that B2B buyers are expecting a seamless hybrid sales interaction. So if we just think about your staffing firm as a singular entity, you've got conversations that are happening from a sales perspective. You've got your website, which communicates a certain portion of information. You have things going out on social media. You might have other areas where you control other corporate profiles. The question is all of that cohesive, not just from a visual perspective, but is it also cohesive from a contextual perspective? The messages that you're sharing, the things that you're promoting, the main tipping points that are in that conversation, do they resonate the same way the entire way through? And the last is that account based marketing is generating much stronger outcomes today. And that goes back to 89% of the buyers are more likely to purchase when they feel understood, right? It really is starting to show a reflection on that specific data point. So as you start really considering the trends that are happening in the market space, as you start considering the behaviors that are sort of that we can count, and even some of the ones that we can maybe speculate on, and then the actual effect that this is having, it should start to paint a little bit of a better picture as to where it is that you are. Now take all of these things and bring them to a micro level with your organization as it pertains to your hyperlocal geographic territories that you support, the industries of your clients. I mean, obviously, the verticals that you do in terms of staffing, and all of those will start to gain additional nuance. And it's in those nuances, if you really pay attention to what those items are and you're very present, you can align things that you do as an organization with those demands and needs and really turn into a really good value add to your community. So now that we understand some of the trends, we understand the data, let's talk about creating a compelling offer and sort of what goes into that. We sort of touched on this a little bit, but in creating this offer, you really have to consider two fundamental requirements. The first is that the offer must hold value with your community. Yeah. And again, I know that this probably sounds very obvious, but if it doesn't hold value with your community, then you're really just sort of wasting your time, right? You're creating a white paper or a resource just in order to sort of create that white paper or resource. You're checking a box. Before you check the box, let's make sure it checks the box of your community first. The next is it must be executable by your team. And when I say by your team, I'm not talking about just marketing being able to execute the technical components of this. That's relatively easy once you understand the structure. I'm talking about once it goes out and it converts, all the other pieces and all the other individuals that are involved, they also have to be able to execute based on what that thing is that you created. So, the two fundamental requirements that you're going to be looking at when trying to create a compelling offer, one is, and the very first one should always be, does it carry value with our community? And the second is, can our team sufficiently execute on it at a level that needs to be done in order for the community to see its value? Yeah. So now that we have sort of those two first pieces, let's talk about how it is that you can go about the ideation process. Yeah. So this is in a prioritized order, just food for thought here, right? The very first thing that we would do as a marketing team for a given brand is we would look to understand what the third party market trends are. So we would go out and look to see who's talking about those very specific nuanced elements that we're contending with. Not necessarily those like larger, broad-reaching, nationwide data points that I showed earlier, but rather those data points as it applies to this specific business or this specific service offering. Then we would survey the frontline team. So you'd want to make sure that you start getting your sales team, or if happens to be a recruitment marketing effort or a recruitment campaign, you want to start getting those individuals involved early on. Yeah. The idea is this: number one, if you get the words that they're using and the conversations that they're having, then the resource will be much more accurate to the audience that you're trying to nurture. And two, if you get their participation on early, then the adoption of this campaign will obviously be much more successful because they'll feel like they're a part of the process and therefore there will be greater ownership. So survey that front line. And on that, you're going to want to make sure you understand what are the conversations that are being had, what are the objections that are coming up, and how is it that you can use the information that you know in that space in order to align an offer that is meaningful. The third piece of this puzzle would be performing a competitive analysis. Now, again, keep these in this order. I would not do the competitive analysis and then bring options to your salespeople. That's a bit counterintuitive. Yes, it could accelerate certain things, but it will also accelerate the fact, like a lack of authenticity, right? So what you want to do is you want to use what it is that your sales and recruiters, whoever the front line is that you're trying to build this resource for, whether it be for employers or for candidates, you want to use that information you're getting from the front line to inform your research, then go and do your competitive analysis, right? Look to see, are there resources that are already being shared that are similar to this? If there are those resources missing anything? Are there any gaps? Are there nuances that can be shared? Or maybe they're not being discovered at all. And so that will give you a landscape where you can say, okay, based on the conversations I had, based on the third party market trends, we see gaps in the conversation here, here, and here. You can now bring that back to your frontline team and say, okay, here's what we've identified. Do you have an opinion on which one would resonate most with the majority of the conversations you're holding? Yeah. The next is you should review engagement post conversion in order to identify any existing efforts and capabilities. So, what that means is you look at what business has closed. And once it's closed and it's successful and you're billing, at that point, I would say go back through and look at all of your previous conversations if possible, right? So you may have transcript software, it might record your conversation so you could actually listen to the audio of it, but go back through and look at your notes, look at your touch points, look at your emails, look at your transcripts, and understand how that conversation progressed to get you that closed deal. It will likely expose some elements that you hadn't really considered that you maybe should be considering when it pertains to how you should be opening up conversations, different pain points you should be touching on, or even identifying a stronger client, ideal client profile that you should be sort of going after. The last is you want to define the value and you also want to define the offer interaction. So when you're looking at the value, you want to make sure, yes, we can create it in this format and it needs to be able to express or resolve these pain points. So you're not necessarily building the resource, but you're getting a really good outline of what it is that you should be able to develop. So the thing that you're sort of aiming for in this target, right? It's this sort of Venn diagram approach. And within this, you've got audience value, you have team expertise, and you have desired format or the desired consumption format. Yeah. So if you only focus on the audience value and the team expertise, and you don't really consider how your audience wants to consume the information, well, then you might produce a great asset, a great resource, but it isn't consumable by the way that they want it. And therefore, it's not used and it creates lackluster performance. If you work only off of your expertise and the desired format, well, then there's no value to your community. And so you see how these three things really do come together in trying to help guide your direction in what it is that you're going to be creating as a resource for your organization and your community. Really do try to make sure you're answering all of these questions. Is there value for the audience? Can my team exercise the effort? And is it in a format that my audience wants to consume? Yeah. As long as you nail all three of those or come pretty close, then you'll be pretty tight on that target and it should perform reasonably well, even for a first time with a handful of errors, assuming that things don't go perfect. So now we're going to talk about offer access format and optimization. When it comes to offer access in marketing, we call it being gated or ungated. So all that really means is, do you need to give me information for you to gain access to this resource? Yeah. Um, Many staffing firms, especially small and mid-size, they don't have a lot of resources or a resource library that they can pull from. And therefore, I would say all of your things should be gated. Yeah. If you're going to spend the time and energy and resources to build out campaigns and really generate traffic and awareness to this particular offer, at least get name and email. Yeah. You might not get a lot of other information if you want to keep your form light so that the conversions stay high, but do put something in place that allows you to filter individuals who might just be kind of fishing around from individuals who might actually be serious in what it is that you're providing to them for information. Once you have a number of resources, I would say, once you start having an active library of, let's say, 5 or more resources, well, then you might want to start to consider how some of them can play a role as an ungated piece of content, which can then be used to push to a gated piece of content. So, strategically speaking, right, a lot of places will consider, making sure that they make as much of their information as possible free and readily available, which is fine. It's great. It could just take a little bit longer in order to see that or realize that potential in a conversion. I'll also tell you it becomes a bit more challenging to measure or quantify the success of a given campaign when you don't have a conversion to necessarily look at. So, making sure that when you do these exercises, if you're really trying to hone in, especially as a first time or a limited time build out, you'll want to make sure that you can count what's happening on that landing page. So gating it with a form will be ideal. Next, you have your format. So is this going to be a downloadable item or is this going to be an interactive item? When you think of a download, think of things like white papers, checklists, ebooks, salary guides, things like that. And when you think interactive, think of things like, assessments, reviews, or audits, right? So if you're going to offer some sort of an interactive approach, even a survey would be a bit more interactive. And so think of the format that fits best for this given criteria. How intense is the topic itself? How much of it will be consumed visually? You might need more data visualization around it in order for the consumption to be a bit easier and to realize the benefit and goal of the resource, in which case then a downloadable resource might make more sense. Or you might have a bit more curation in the process that will turn it into being a much more valuable interactive resource for your community. Therefore, perhaps some sort of a survey that brings down some of that information, gives your team an opportunity to sort of digest it and come up with the findings to then do a follow up meeting. Maybe that would be a better scenario. So just think of the format types that you have access to. We'll talk about promotion in a moment, but think about basically for this particular section in formatting, you're really thinking about what is the consumption that would be easiest to show or extend even more value to the person that's downloading or interacting with the offer. The last piece of this is optimization. So many times, campaigns, we'll see campaigns in the marketplace that are very linear. We have this checklist, download this checklist today. You download the checklist, you get a thank you message, and you're done. And that's good. Like that obviously gets the effect done. But this is a campaign. This is something that you've spent a lot of time and resources to build out to ensure that there's really good alignment, not only with your organization or your brand, but also with your sales initiatives, your corporate initiatives, your goals. And so all of that really should have like more intent. And so while you're bringing people through this process and through this experience, make sure that you are offering other opportunities for more help as it relates to the topic of the campaign. So, we'll get into that again. There's a bit of a strategy around it where you won't distract from the initial conversion, but certainly you could be smart about how you insert these additional secondary or tertiary conversion points. So now that we have all those pieces in place, let's talk about the technical build out for your landing page. So your landing page structure has started to change a bit. Your search engines like Google, Bing, Yahoo, they are starting to, I don't necessarily know that I would say demand, but they are certainly looking to or rewarding good behavior when you have landing pages that have a higher word count. Here's why. Higher word counts typically yield opportunities for greater contextual reference as it pertains to keywords and long tail keywords. They also can help to, through the algorithmic elements of those search engines, really ensure that if this thing is going to show up in a search engine results page, a SERP, as it might be called, then they can know that they're doing it with a certain level of accuracy. If you don't have a lot of words on that page, and we've already said that a landing page shouldn't have a lot of excess links to distract you from the form fill. So if that's what it is that you're building, then your search engines are going to have a really hard time understanding what it is that you have there and whether or not they should show it to anyone else. You have to remember, this isn't a person looking at it, it's a computer. And so computers are certainly getting smarter, as we all know, but you're still working off of ones and zeros, right? So we have to make sure that we give them more data so that way they can know how to set that page in prominence. So that's why there's a really big push here to make sure that you improve your landing pages. So when it comes to the structure, here's sort of the breakdown in an outline form, and we will be going through a wireframe in just a moment. So at the top of the page, you're going to have your hero image, something compelling that has a contextual reference to what it is that you're talking about. Within that hero image, you're also going to include a title and a value proposition to your offer. Yeah, so you want to make sure that once again, it's compelling, it's tight, it fits, it reads properly, and it gets someone either excited or concerned. In marketing, you're doing the same thing as sales. You're either marketing something on fear or marketing something on excitement. So this is no different. The next is the teaser or description, really, kind of propping up, bolstering, and aligning this particular campaign resource to what it is that they're experiencing today and why it's going to help improve their worlds. And then you'll also include some takeaways, right? The things that they're going to learn as a result of going through this process with you. So I look at that as sort of the 3 T's: title, teaser, takeaways. Every single landing page that you have is going to have a hero, title, teaser, and takeaways. That's how it should be set up. Now, like I said in the beginning or earlier on, this content should be gated, especially if you're not doing a lot of lead generation content or a lot of these types of campaigns. You'll want to make sure that you have a form in there that will give you conversion data and also ensure that that you have something to collect that you can count, right? And then you could determine this many conversions to this many what we consider sales qualified leads into this many conversations, meetings, and so forth. But you need a form in order to do that. That form should absolutely be connected to your CRM. If you cannot connect your form to your CRM for whatever reason, albeit maybe you're in a system that doesn't have an integration into your website solution, which is called a CMS or a content management system like WordPress. So if you don't have a connection in there, then at the bare minimum, set up conversion alerts into a group inbox. This is pretty benign and simple. Group inboxes, whether you're in a Microsoft environment or a Google environment, they won't cost you any money because you're not attaching any license to it. And you can also either insert automations that will circulate the information out of that inbox or give multiple people access to the inbox to ensure that you've got more eyes on that conversion when it comes through so that people follow up in a timely fashion. Underneath this section, here's where I would look to include something like a graphic illustration, something that will, again, further explain the details around what this offer is and why it's important, and provide a little bit more it gives you a little bit of a break. Yeah, like it gives the viewer a little bit of a break or a breather from the content. But in adding that visual contextual reference, it also softens it a bit and makes it a bit more accessible. Underneath that, there's a really good opportunity to be able to create an explanation of the elements in your graphic design, right? So you can do that. And that starts to get yourself into a really good spot for a very robust landing page. Now, what you'll notice is that the only thing that you can convert on so far that I've said is the form. And that's how landing pages should be. Yeah, best practices are get them to come in, reduce the distraction, and hopefully they maintain the direction and fill out that form for you. If you want some additional things, like let's say you're really going to try to go for that first place trophy, you could also include things like performance data. So for individuals who do focus on this thing, you can use obviously third-party market information. You could use information inside your own ecosystem that you have client data on. But providing some sort of like data reference as to why this is important and why they should consider it is another great tip. You could put team pro tips in there. So let's just say, for instance, you have some seasoned subject matter experts, and they have something additionally that they'd like to say, or they have good insights into why this is really important at this time of the year or at this moment in time. Include those pro tips and allow them to get a sense of the thought leadership that you have inside your organization. Last, you could even include some testimonials. So putting those testimonials in that space, once again, it's nothing that's clickable, but it does obviously continue to bolster this resource and really prop it up as being a value add for your community. So now that we understand sort of the outline, let's look at the wireframe of this. So for those that don't know, a wireframe is simply put, just like you see on the left-hand side there, right? It's basically an overarching outline. It blocks things out, tells you basically like placeholders where things should live and how they belong. Everything else after that, you'll design out and it'll be a full fidelity page. So in here, we can see obviously at the very top, you have your hero image. Images give you the opportunity to put in alt text. Alt text is more words, right? So you could use your keywords as they associate to the topic that's on this page. Your title and your value proposition, obviously they sit inside the hero. As a side note, just make sure that if you are going to use an image and you are using text, that those things don't compete with one another, not only on desktop, but also in mobile responsiveness, so that when it does abbreviate, you want to make sure that it's still legible. Underneath that, you're going to have a breakout of sections. Usually this is broken down, I would say like either, 25% and 75% or 33 and 66. But basically the larger chunk of this space is going to be for your description. And then underneath there, you'll have your bullets for your first, second, third takeaways, whatever it is, right? Whatever the value items are. Inside of your form, you're going to request the certain number of fields that you absolutely need, obviously, right? That's going to be your first and foremost. So you're going to need name, you're going to need email, because you're going to be circulating this resource via email. And let's just pause on that for just a quick moment. Why do we need email? Why are we circulating via email? You're circulating via email because when you give this to your sales team to follow up, you want to make sure that that email is functioning and working. So you want to encourage them to give you an email because you're going to be circulating whatever this resource is via email. Yeah. It means that your team spends less time chasing dead leads and more time focusing on real people that are downloading the resource. To that end, you could add any number of things in here. Keep in mind the general rule is if you add more fields, fewer people will fill it out. Yeah. So it's not to say that you can't have anything. It's not to say that you can only have one or two things in here, but you would want to make sure that like you are using every portion of this campaign to filter out all the people that you don't necessarily want to talk to. Keep in mind, every part of this, what this is doing is it's taking you from a very broad scope, bringing you into a concept, taking that concept, bringing them into a landing page, taking that person on the landing page, pushing them through a form. All of these things should be filtering mechanisms. You're not going for quantity, you're going for quality. So underneath that section, that's where you could sort of see this graphic illustration. And so I kind of did like this very simple, like progressive element, but you could have a line, you could have a chart, you could have a flywheel, you could have whatever it is that you think makes the most sense to be contextually relevant to what the opportunity is in obviously interacting with this resource. Underneath there, if you've got multiple stages in that graphic, this is a good opportunity to be able to bring up each one of those stages and why it's important and how it impacts the organization and what it means in the future and all those kind of nuanced elements. And then once again, underneath that, you could have performance data, you could have pro tips, you could have testimonials. All of those things are great. Keep in mind, you do not want to have additional conversions on this page. Limit distractions. I can't tell you how many times we find landing pages that have at the bottom relevant blogs. Once I get you to a landing page, the last thing I want to do is send you off to a blog, right? I got you to the goal that I had. As a marketer, as a company, this is the thing that I wanted to happen most. The last thing I want to do is send you off down another rabbit hole and have you forget about the offer that you came in on. Okay. So keep your distractions to a minimum. We are going to circle up with forms for just a moment too. I do want to just mention inside those forms, don't forget you need to thank the person when they do a submission. There is nothing worse than having the form zero out and not knowing whether or not it went anywhere. So as a visitor, I need to get a visual cue to know that my interaction with your landing page was in fact successful. Now you can do two different kinds, and I'm sure there's others, people on that see this are going to say, well, there's actually 5 others or 7 others. There's predominantly 2 other kinds of thank yous that you could do. One would be either a pop-up or an inline message. That pop-up would obviously, as it says in its name, show up in the front of your screen and then give you a message with regards to the fact that your submission was successful. An inline would just sort of appear on the form itself and thank you for the submission. These are good at providing a little bit of feedback to the visitor so that way I know the thing that I did was effective. It means that I won't submit multiple submissions for it. The second and the better option would be to actually create a separate thank you page. The reason why thank you pages are great in this instance is because number one, it provides you an opportunity to set expectations better, right? You can communicate next steps. You have more space that you could explore and play in. Two, you can offer related assistance. Yeah. So think about it. You have this checklist to ensure that they're doing things right and minimizing risk as they move into this next stage of X, whatever it is. Well, on that thank you page, you give them the expectations. Hey, Jeff, thank you so much for downloading that content. It's going to be in your inbox momentarily. If you don't see it in your inbox immediately, please do check that junk folder before you resubmit. And then if you want to talk about how you can exercise this checklist, or you want to talk about fundamental features of your organization and how it applies to your checklist, why don't you schedule an appointment? And now you can insert a little calendar snippet, an embed code where you can actually put a calendar function in there. Yeah. Or you could do another form. You could certainly do another form as well. You could add educational resources. Those educational resources don't need to be more white papers or other conversions. That's a great opportunity for you to start inserting relevant blogs based on tags. You can also engage and monitor the behavior on these pages for future marketing campaigns. So I would highly recommend making sure that you have some sort of a tool on your website that kind of tracks the human behavior a bit. How far do they scroll? Where do their mouse mostly stay? Where are they clicking? What are the heat maps or the confetti mapping? So that way you can see sort of like how people are interacting with your space. And last, as like a final tip to this, it would be goal tracking. So whenever you're setting up goaling in things like Google Analytics, or if you're in like Bing Web Tools, as you set up the goals on these things, giving them a final page URL where they need to end up on is a really easy way to ensure that the whole process actually stuck the entire way through. So now you can look at who is our audience and who did we serve this up to, both from an ecosystem perspective as well as just an overarching network perspective. You can then dial it down into traffic to that page itself, and then conversions on that form, and then who got to that thank you page. Knowing that the thank you page is the end, that is sort of your finish line for the campaign itself, will tell you a lot about what that process was. If you have a secondary conversion on that thank you page, which offers an additional conversion, as I said, to offer related assistance or additional help, now you can look to see how many people got to the final stage and then how many people out of that group asked for more help. All of this helps you to continue to improve either this campaign, right? Because you could make adjustments while it's live, or as you build out your next campaigns, ways that you might want to improve on that. So these are all things to consider when it comes down to your landing page wireframe, as well as what you should maybe think about when putting together a thank you page. So how do we coordinate lead generation campaigns? A couple of fun things to keep in mind, right? Like these things don't happen accidentally, right? So great campaigns are powered by clearly defined corporate initiatives. You know that you're going to be moving forward to do this particular thing. You are going to participate in these events, or share this type of information, or respond to certain market conditions, or be the educational resource for X. If you know what that thing is, creating these campaigns is going to be a lot easier. Successful lead generation also has strong team collaboration. If you're performing these things or trying to exercise these concepts inside of silos or in a vacuum where marketing does its thing and sales does its thing and something else does something other thing, that will or could work, right? It could work. But as you start to compound these efforts, this is sort of like a 1 + 1 = 3 kind of situation. So it also will compound the output, giving you better results in the long run. Last, aligning audience value is always, 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 always key. Yeah. In fact, I probably should have put that as bullet one. But align it with the audience value. Make sure, once again, that every time you kind of go through this, you go back and you think about, hey, is this right for the audience? Is this right for the audience? Is this right for the audience? If it is, you likely will end up with good results. Yeah. Even if the campaign, the connectivity, like even if something else is out off kilter, you bring really strong value to your community, it will still work. So earlier this year, I did a session, I did a talk track for the American Staffing Association where we were talking about sort of coordinating efforts. And I'm going to spare obviously like the whole build out of this, but in this workflow, what you get a sense of is by department, who's responsible for what. And I'm just going to kind of run through this pretty quickly, but as you could see, in order to really develop a really strong campaign, you really need to have the partnership of leadership, marketing, sales, marketing ops. Like all these things do come together in a really beautiful way. And in that effort, you do get much stronger results at the end of the day. So when it comes to leadership, they're there to unite people. They're there to, make sure that they provide that unified support and encouraging optimism that the idea should or hopefully will work as everybody intended. Leadership should also have a very firm understanding of the orchestration framework, how it's all coming together, where these things are going into, who's responsible for what components of it. Sales leadership isn't all that different. It's kind of the same thing. You also want sales leadership to be a bit of a cheerleader for this, right? So you want them to provide that unified support. And they also, from their perspective, need to understand the orchestration framework as it relates to lead gen, not lead gen, but lead management workflows. Yeah. So, how, when that lead comes in, is it being circulated and what are the expectations of the people that are getting it? We then move over to sales. So sales is going to be very much responsible at this stage of the game. They're responsible for what topics are opening up conversations and leading to new business. Once again, if you remember one of the earlier slides, I talked about, making sure that individuals on your frontline team provided you information with regards to the conversations that led to closed business. This is exactly what I'm talking about. So what were those initial things? Not necessarily just the pain points, but how did they maneuver around the pain points, the objections, the issues that they were having in order to close that business? Now, some of the things that have closed obviously will have just closed because they were ready to move, but and that is good, but it may not be a healthy or a helpful exercise for what it is that you're trying to obtain. You're really looking for the more traditional, whatever you consider traditional sales cycle is at your organization, you're looking for more of that type of information, not the things that came in really quickly and won easily, right? Also from the sales team, they also should be able to provide you the objections that are blocking progress, right? So as you're looking at the day-to-day that they're sort of interacting with, you know, what is it that they're running into that's causing conversations to not carry forward? There may be some things that you could identify in that space that would allow you to create additional resources or to modify this particular resource to ensure that you're not only educating but also serving up information to resolve some of those objections. When marketing gets it, they're involved obviously in the ideation introduction. So bringing some of the ideas and concepts to the table. They also need to make sure that like this does very much align to that like middle of the funnel type of concept or even maybe upper middle. They need to develop the resource. They need to educate on the campaign user experience. So, what's the rollout schedule? What's the messaging? What are the follow up recommendations? And how should the feedback loop occur? So, they're basically, providing the recipe as well as, cooking the dish too, right? But they're providing the recipe and making sure that the table is set. When it comes to marketing ops, that individual is going to be responsible for lead conversion connectivity. So making sure that the website is connected to your CRM or that it alerts to a group inbox, as I mentioned before. They're also going to be involved in database segmentation. So making sure that you have clear rules that identify active database versus dormant database. So just to put a defining element on that, active databases are ones, I believe, that have had some sort of contact or outreach done by your frontline team within the last 45 to 60 days. Anything beyond that, if it hasn't been touched, I would determine that it is a dormant contact and therefore needs to fall into into the main database to be nurtured. You'll have to set up the rules that make sense for your organization, but that's the difference between active and dormant. So when it comes to dormant database, you're looking at things like previous clients or maybe no relationship at all, like stuff that sort of came into your database because sales attempted to try to bring it through their prospecting, but it didn't end up actually transacting. From an active database perspective, I would say things that are currently a current MSA or even actively billing, because I know that you could have an MSA that's not billing. So current MSAs and MSAs that are billing, as well as current prospect pipeline. All of those would be the responsibility of your sales team, but your marketing ops person should help you sort of break that down. And then they should also be responsible for automation delivery. So making sure that your autoresponders are in place, which will feed or serve out whatever the resource is once the conversion occurs, as well as dormant database messaging. So not that they necessarily have to create the message, that can happen from marketing, but that they will set the message in place. And then also make sure that the lead circulation rules are active and working properly. Now, some of you might be thinking like, hey, Jeff, I don't have marketing ops in my team. You might not even have marketing on your team for that matter. And all of that's okay. If you don't have marketing ops on your team, but you do have someone that's sort of like being your I was going to say quarterback, but I try to stay away from sports analogies, right? But like if someone is basically conducting your marketing for you, and you don't have marketing ops, then that'll likely roll over to either the person that's doing your marketing for you, or it might roll over to your operations person. If you don't have operations, then it might be sales leadership, or it could be part of your executive team. Once marketing ops is done, though, then you move back into sort of sales leadership, which they're responsible for the rollout schedule reinforcement. So making sure that everybody knows how it's going to go with regards to the sales team. They also have to have campaign distribution requirements. So they should be setting the expectations to the sales team as to what they should be doing in order to initiate or to participate with this kickoff. And then they also have to set all of the follow-up expectations. So making sure that the sales team knows when something comes through and it's distributed to them, here is what the rules are for the road and that what you want them to do and how you want them to follow up. Your sales team from that point needs to be responsible for the initial promotion. And I'm not saying that they're promoting individually. I'm saying that they're promoting their portion of this campaign. So they have to be responsible for the initial promotion as well as lead follow-up. They have to provide campaign correction and lead quality feedback. So if something is broken, if you see something, say something. And then also follow up from marketing leads. So making sure that like when these things come through, those do get a sense of urgency and we follow up on what they are. At the end, the entire team should come together in a post-campaign performance review. You should all look at this holistically from all the different angles of your participation and make sure that you learn as much as you can from the thing that you just developed. There should be a campaign review that looks at gaps that have occurred so that way you can adjust for the following campaign. And then I would also start to set up a preliminary date and concept for your next campaign. If you wait too long, all of this starts to feel like you're redoing it from scratch again, and it doesn't have to be that way. So this reminds me a bit of like when I was a kid, right? I think it was Schoolhouse Rock, like knowledge is power. And so, look, what you're trying to do here is build transparency. When I was internal, obviously I had a lot more control over the requirement of this, but I would urge you that if you're going to roll out a campaign and that campaign is going to be fed, not fed, but be supported by a number of individuals across your organization, train everyone. Everyone. I don't care if you've done 100 salary guides and the person has done 99 of those, they should be in the training too. What it really boils down to is if you have tenured individuals who have had a lot of experience with it, they could bring that experience to the table. The other thing is, we said that the market is changing. We said that the behavior is changing. And so, therefore, there may be some nuance to the way that you're going to address or do this year in order to hopefully improve the outcome. That person who's done it 99 or 100 times, they need to hear what the new plan is. And obviously, the person who hasn't done this before, they gain benefit from it as well. So, you're going to want to do in this training, you're going to want to educate about the resource and the benefit. So here's what the resource is. Here's how it's going to behave. Here's what we think the value is to the community. You're going to define the lead type that's being generated, right? So everybody's waiting still to this day for blank checks to be waived. Unfortunately, the day of waiving blank checks, especially in the B2B space, are kind of over. Yeah. So unless you're in a highly transactional space, like let's say software sales, where you are equating, or you're calculating for a certain amount of like premature churn or churn within a certain time frame in order to get the ones that stick, that's great. But when you're in a professional services sort of industry or a professional services business, that doesn't work very well, and it could impact, a lot of your business itself. So educate your team on this. Let them know this is not a tier one lead. It's typically not going to be someone waving a blank check unless they're in despair. It's likely going to be someone who is a bit further up the funnel, a tier two lead, someone who's looking for information. It's going to give you an opportunity to build a rapport and build a connection with someone, to which you can then gradually bring them down the funnel to get them to business. You want to make sure that you're sharing the lead management workflow, how everything is going to progress, where it's going to come in, how they're going to get that lead coming into their inbox, or what they need to be monitoring. You're going to set follow-up expectations, and those follow-up expectations should be coming from your sales leadership, not your marketing people. Because your sales leader, or if it's a recruitment marketing campaign, it should be coming from the head of recruitment. It should be coming from the people that are managing those KPIs and managing those people. If it comes from marketing, it tends to unfortunately not have enough teeth into it, and therefore it doesn't typically yield the behaviors that you want. You want to provide those messaging templates for calls and emails. Not that we're trying to script people, but we are trying to give them an idea of how it is that they should be interacting with inbound leads or leads that are coming from conversion. And then you're going to review that kickoff schedule. So making sure that they're aware the kickoff is going to happen on this time. We as an organization are going to holistically go after it all together as a group. And then as things progress, here's how, here's the next milestone, here's the next milestone, here's the next milestone. It provides them a roadmap as to how this whole thing is going to be executed, and then what they can expect in return that the company is going to continue to progress, and how long this campaign will run. When it comes to coordinated distribution, it's this is the preparation portion, right? So you want to make sure that that dormant database segmentation and messaging is done. That's usually from marketing, as I said, marketing and marketing ops. If you don't have a marketing or marketing ops person, it's likely going to roll to operations. You also want to organize that promotional social media as well. I'm sorry, not social media. You want to organize the promotional media and all the supporting content materials. So that could be social media posts. It could be blogs. It could be ads that are going to live around your website for your homepage and your right and left panels. It could be banners that are going to go into your blogs. It could be cover photos for your social media. It's all the things that you're going to prop up and populate to make sure that this campaign really gets a robust serving. You're going to publish those teasers and schedule that core content. Don't do this the day of. I call that being hand to mouth. That's why we grocery shop, on a weekly basis, let's say. That's why we have freezers. We have all these things at our disposal so that way, when we're hungry, we don't need to necessarily go to the store to buy something else. And if you are, then you're lucky that you can get fresh produce and everything on the day that you're going to eat it. But make sure that you're scheduling out that core content so that your schedule stays on time and you don't have something weird that comes in and takes priority from you releasing information with regards to the campaign. That will create misalignment. Sales pipeline organization and prioritization, that should be happening from your sales team. So on your sales side, they should be prepping their lists, who they're going to contact first, how that's going to play out. And I would say do it in a measured way. Don't have them blast everybody all at once in the same day. In the event that they actually get really strong conversions, you want to make sure that they have time to be able to actually execute properly. But let's also maybe tempo and throttle that so that you can learn which things are converting better, so that way you can make adjustments to future messaging as well. So now let's get into which elements you should be measuring in order to understand project ROI. So as we just mentioned, you've got a lot of different hands in this pot, and you've got a lot of people that are working on things. When it comes to sales, what you're looking for is accountability with regards to campaign initiative support. So are they providing ideas and insights? Are they providing feedback with regards to their active conversations? Are they also involved in the review process to make sure that this thing is going to land exactly how it should for the community that we're serving? You also want to make sure that their active client outreach is being done. So they're responsible for interacting with their clients. They're also obviously responsible for reaching out to their prospect pipeline. And then lastly, they're going to be responsible for follow-up timeliness. On the marketing side, they're going to be responsible for research and development. I'm sorry, resource development as well as research. They're also going to be responsible for team training. They're going to be responsible for the promotion of it all, website, social, dormant database. And inside that dormant database, they're going to be looking at deliverability by segments. They're going to be looking at opens, clicks, and conversions. And then they also need to be very responsive to feedback, right? If your sales team is providing them information with things that are going wrong and they're not doing something quick enough to respond to what that is, then what happens is your salespeople won't feel heard, and then they're going to stop participating when it comes to campaigns going forward. Everybody is accountable to the other department. Under marketing ops, they're going to be responsible for staging, testing, and responsiveness. So once again, you want to make sure that like they're putting the pieces together, they're being tested properly, and that you have reasonable expectations that they're working according to how it is that it's been sort of crafted. So now we get into the metrics. As you think about this, number one, don't track metrics on a daily basis. I don't, unless you've got that kind of volume, I don't think it's necessarily a wise decision. You should look at things across windows of time that give you some insight into how people are interacting with messages as those messages evolve, as the campaign evolves, as the nurturing continues. So we typically look at things from a 30, 60, 90, and 180 days perspective on campaigns. The first thing you're looking at is reach. So how many relevant people are in your ecosystem is sort of question number one. That really speaks to your database predominantly. So how many people are your sales team reaching out to, both clients and prospects? How big is your database? What was the deliverability like? Start with those numbers first. The second part of reach is going to be your combined network reach. So the brand itself will have a certain number of followers that are following your social media pages and traffic to your website. But beyond that, as your team shares different elements of the campaign, it's now reaching into their networks. So if they've done a really good job of building out their social media to serve their professional lives, then the people, the numbers that are in their networks will support the business or support the campaign initiatives. So from reach, you're looking at conversion, right? And conversions, I'm just going to stop with, marketing qualified leads. If the message is on point and the content is on point and the value is on point and the landing page works properly and the form works properly, then it should bring people in. And those initial conversions would typically be deemed an MQL because they would have gone through rounds of information before converting on that form. Everything else is just traffic, right? Traffic, I mean, you could say that there's a visitor, you've got conversions, but I'm looking at form conversions as MQLs. Next, you're looking at leads. So as you look at the marketing qualified leads, I want to know how many of those can shift into an SQL or a sales qualified lead, right? So we've produced this many conversions to the website based on all the messaging and communication. How many of those are being followed up on and called? Those are your SQLs. From there, you're going to look at your follow-up. So they have to get registered in the CRM. And we also want to understand what the SQL performance is, right? Which then leads us to our connects. So the quality of conversions will be based on whether or not we can get them on a call, they respond to an email, we can get them into a meeting. Obviously, if it turns into new business, right? Or the potential for new business. So as we assess like the company profile that we have in front of us, that might give you some additional anecdotal information that you can lean on to say, hey, this is a good or a bad lead for us. The next part is going to be meetings. So you're looking at basically pipeline progress, right? So from all those connects and those outreach and the follow-up on the SQLs, how many of those turned into meetings? And then obviously how much of that turned into revenue? You'll want to track all of these bits because this will be a different closing ratio than any of the business stuff that you've done in the past, right? If your sales team gets a referral from a previous client or a relationship that they have and they reach out to that individual and they make a phone call, get a meeting, and then have an MSA signed, that is going to transact a lot faster than if someone doesn't know who your brand is, they convert on a salary guide, they then come into your ecosystem, and then you're just starting conversations. That sales cycle is going to be a lot longer. It's not that it's a bad lead. It's that person doesn't have the time or hasn't had the time to warm up to your brand and build all of that trust. So take that into consideration as you are collecting all this data. You'll then be able to say, this is how the sales cycle works when sales does their outreach. This is how the sales cycle works when marketing does a campaign to support sales. This is maybe how sales works when we go to an event and we're doing an effort here. Each one of these will live in its own metric. And then from there, you can make determinations on what you should do next in order to create more predictive outcomes. So when it comes to some pro tips on this, basically, first, whenever possible, build for scale and reuse, right? So make sure that it's a sustainable structure and something that you can go back to over and over and over again. Um, Not that the information is the same, but the structure should be the same. So once you have a landing page formatted, that's kind of the format, right? You don't necessarily have to go and reinvent the wheel. All of your images and all of your content, all of that information should be new and fresh. But the overall structure of that wireframe doesn't necessarily have to be different. Next, prospects are doing the work, make it worth their time, right? So make sure that you've got good quality over quantity. You don't just want to cast a wide net or chum the waters with a bunch of garbage. You're going to want to make sure that you're putting something out there that's of quality, because that quality should resonate with the audience that you're trying to attract, because you've identified that audience as being ideal for your business, right? So quality over quantity. Also, don't be afraid to increase your fields in your form. Now, that doesn't mean to give them a full blown application on the form fill, but don't be afraid to increase your fields in your form, that it will reduce or restrict the number of conversions, because that's the point of a form. Yeah. So even, I'm talking about quality over quantity for your visitor or for the person consuming the information, but also keep in mind that also plays out internally too. If you're getting a whole bunch of leads, but the vast majority of them are junk, then use the tools within the structure to start to restrict and limit that a bit. Assess the friction from the prospect's point of view. Test for function and UX. Put yourself in that receiver's shoes. Do you have any gaps in the communication? Are expectations being met based on the timelines that you've put together? All those things are very, very important. And then progress over perfection, right? The first one is always the worst one. It takes a lot of time and effort to put it together. There's things that you're going to miss. Even if you've, suffered from analysis paralysis and you think you've checked all the boxes, I guarantee you something could have been done differently. And so just know it's progress over perfection. This is the first one, but there's going to be a second one, and that one's going to be better, and a third, and a fourth, and so on. The main moral of the story is that today your execution must be intentional. You cannot passively grow leads. That's not how it works anymore. Okay. So make sure that you're intentional in what it is that you're executing, and really driving those things in that are very beneficial to your organization, with things that are high value for your community. So as an offer that I want to do for all of you, that QR code will actually go right to a Calendly link. And so in there, you can book time on my calendar for us to be able to chat about a campaign that is either running or maybe a previous campaign. And I'll work with you in order to help identify some areas of opportunity to improve your positioning, your delivery, maybe improve or reduce the amount of friction that might be experienced, and hopefully improving the ROI of your efforts. So happy to do that for anyone who is in this session or is listening to this session. Just go ahead and scan that QR code. It'll take you right to a Calendly page. Book some time that's convenient for you, and let's have a conversation about some campaigns or a campaign that you've worked on. And that brings us to the end. I appreciate everyone sticking it out. I know that webinars can be long and go on for a while. So, an hour is a long time to ask for people. Once again, if you want to do a campaign review, go ahead and scan that QR code. Happy to get on a call and do that with you. Certainly, once again, too, my name is Jeff Pelliccio, the founder and CEO of Allied Insight. If we're not connected on LinkedIn, please certainly connect with me. Happy to talk to you there as well. And look, I hope that this has been informative, regardless of what your position is in your organization, whether you are doing the marketing, you are responsible for the business development, or you are an executive. I do hope that you have found this valuable and insightful, and that it produces some good conversations for you and your organization. Thank you all so much for attending, and have a great day.
Jeff, thank you so much on behalf of everyone at Scale Funding. We really appreciate it.